She didn't lose you when you walked away. She lost you the moment she stopped seeing your value while you were still standing right in front of her. And this is where it all really begins. Most people think love ends because someone changes, someone cheats, or someone stops caring. But in reality, the most dangerous thing in any relationship isn't conflict, distance, or even betrayal. It's familiarity. It's when your presence becomes normal, when your effort becomes expected, when your loyalty becomes something she no longer feels she needs to earn. At first, she noticed everything about you: your consistency, your patience, your attention, the way you showed up even on days you didn't feel like. But over time, what once felt rare started to feel guaranteed. And human psychology works in a brutal way. We protect what we believe is scarce, and we neglect what we believe will always be there. You didn't lose value. Your value was simply no longer perceived, and there's a massive difference between the two. The sun doesn't become less powerful just because someone stops looking at it. But when someone gets used to its warmth, they forget how cold life is without it. That's exactly what happens when love becomes familiar. She stopped seeing you as a choice and started seeing you as a constant, not a privilege, but a background presence. Something stable, something safe, something she didn't have to think about losing. And the irony is, the more consistent you are, the more at risk you become of being taken for granted if there's no emotional tension, no polarity, no sense that your presence is something that must be valued. You gave freely, you stayed loyal, you were patient during her mood swings, her confusion, her emotional distance. You didn't disappear, you didn't play games, you didn't threaten to leave, you simply stayed. And in her mind, that created an unconscious belief you're not going anywhere, which slowly turns into I don't have to try as hard anymore, and eventually becomes I don't really see what I could lose. This is how love dies quietly, not with arguments, not with drama, not with some big explosive ending, but with comfort, with emotional laziness, with the slow fading of appreciation. She didn't wake up one day and decide you had no value. She just stopped noticing it because it was always there. Your messages were no longer exciting. Your attention no longer felt special. Your presence no longer felt rare. And when something no longer feels rare, the brain stops treating it as important. But here's the part no one talks about: familiarity doesn't destroy value, it hides it. And the moment you're no longer constantly available, the moment your energy pulls back, the moment your presence is removed, reality hits. That's when the silence becomes loud. That's when she starts replaying old memories. That's when she realizes how much emotional space you were filling without her even noticing. Because absence reveals what presence concealed. She didn't know what she had because she never had to imagine life without it. And by the time she finally does, you're no longer standing where she left you. You've already become the lesson. And then something even more subtle happened, something most people never realize until it's too late. She didn't just get used to your presence, she reinterpreted it. What started as emotional strength slowly got translated in her mind as emotional weakness. Your patience became, he'll tolerate anything. Your calm became, won't challenge me. Your loyalty became, is not going anywhere. And without even meaning to, she began to confuse your emotional maturity with low standards. This is one of the most dangerous traps in relationships, because when someone doesn't understand emotional intelligence, they don't see patience as strength. They see it as permission: permission to pull back, permission to invest less, permission to test boundaries without consequences. You weren't weak, you were stable. But stability in the wrong dynamic starts to feel boring instead of valuable. And when someone gets bored of emotional safety, they unconsciously start looking for stimulation elsewhere, not necessarily another person, but emotional contrast, drama, uncertainty, tension. Something that makes them feel something again. You try to understand her moods. You stayed calm during arguments. You didn't explode, didn't threaten, didn't withdraw love every time things got uncomfortable. You thought that being emotionally grounded would create deeper connection. And it should, with someone who understands emotional depth. But with someone who operates from insecurity or novelty, seeking your calmness doesn't feel grounding, it feels predictable. And predictable to the unhealed mind feels unexciting. So she started pushing, not consciously, not maliciously, but emotionally. She delayed replies. Became less affectionate. She gave mixed signals. And every time you stayed, every time you tolerated it without shifting the dynamic, her subconscious learned something powerful: I can pull away and you'll still be here. And once that belief is formed, respect quietly erodes, not because you're doing something wrong, but because the relationship no longer has emotional consequences. This is why people often say they lost attraction for no reason. There was a reason. It was just invisible. It was the absence of boundaries. Not spoken boundaries, not ultimatums, but energetic boundaries. The kind that say, without words, my time matters, my energy matters, and access to me is earned. You never said that. You lived the opposite. You gave access freely, even when the emotional investment wasn't being matched. And here's the painful truth: The more someone feels they can treat you casually, the more casual they will treat you. Not because they want to hurt you, but because humans adjust behavior based on perceived value. If something requires effort to maintain, we protect it. If something remains even when effort disappears, we stop respecting it. So she didn't see your patience as love. She saw it as tolerance. She didn't see your silence as emotional control. She saw it as emotional submission. She didn't see your loyalty as depth. She saw it as dependency. And that shift in perception is what quietly changes how someone feels about you, even if they can't explain it themselves. But the irony is brutal. The very traits that made you rare are the same traits that got misunderstood. And once she finally realizes that patience wasn't weakness, that calm wasn't passivity, that loyalty wasn't desperation, the regret begins because by then the version of you who tolerated being undervalued no longer exists. And this is where reality finally steps in, not through words, not through arguments, not through some dramatic goodbye, but through silence. The kind of silence that doesn't beg, doesn't explain, doesn't try to fix anything. Just absence. And absence has a way of doing what no amount of talking ever could. It forces reflection. While you were there every day, filling emotional space, solving problems, offering comfort, she never had to feel the weight of what you gave. Your presence covered the gaps. Your consistency softened the consequences. Your effort made everything feel easier than it really was. So she never truly felt what life without you would look like. She never had to sit with the emptiness because you were always there to fill it. But the moment you pull back, something shifts inside her. The emotional environment changes. The energy feels different. The air feels quieter. The routines feel off. And suddenly, the things she used to ignore become loud. The good morning texts that aren't there, the steady attention that vanished, the emotional support that no longer shows up automatically. And that's when the brain starts replaying memories. This is how the mind works. We don't fully value things while they're constantly present. We value them when they're gone. Loss creates contrast. Contrast creates awareness, and awareness creates regret. She starts noticing all the invisible ways you contributed to her emotional world, the stability, the reassurance, the way you listened without judgment, the way you stayed calm when she was chaotic. None of that felt important when it was always available, but without it, the emotional cost becomes real. And here's the part most people don't understand: she doesn't miss you at first. She misses the feeling of being supported, chosen, and emotionally safe. Then slowly, that feeling gets associated with you, not the arguments, not the flaws, not the small annoyances. The brain filters those out. What remains is the emotional imprint you left behind, the version of you that made her feel grounded, understood, and valued. This is why absence hits harder than confrontation. If you had argued, begged, or tried to convince her of your worth, she would have stayed emotionally defensive. But silence removes resistance. There's nothing to fight against, nothing to react to, just space. In that space, the truth rises on its own. She starts asking herself questions she never asked before. Why does everything feel different? Why am I thinking about him now? Why does no one else feel the same? And she might not admit it out loud, but internally she feels the emotional withdrawal. Not because she lost control over you, but because she lost the emotional resource you provided. Your absence becomes a mirror. It reflects back everything she took for granted: the emotional labor, the consistency, the security. And the irony is, she finally sees your value at the exact moment she no longer has access to it. That's when regret forms, not from missing your face, but from feeling the emotional void you used to fill effortlessly. Because presence hides value, absence reveals it. And once something is revealed through loss, it's never seen the same again. And then something even deeper happens. Once she starts feeling the absence, once the emotional silence sets in, her mind naturally begins to compare, not consciously at first, not in a logical way, but emotionally. Every new interaction, every new connection, every new person she talks to gets measured against a standard she didn't even know existed until you were gone. Your standard. At first, the new attention feels exciting, fresh energy, different conversations, new validation. But excitement is not depth, novelty is not connection, and slowly, without her realizing it, she starts noticing what's missing: the consistency, the emotional safety, the way you listened instead of just waited to speak, the way you stayed when things weren't convenient, the way you showed up without needing to be chased. New people might be charming, confident, attractive, even interesting, but they don't know her patterns. They don't understand her emotional rhythms. They don't anticipate her moods. They don't care in the same quiet, steady way you did. And this is where the comparison becomes painful, because she finally understands that what you gave her wasn't common. It was rare, and rare things only feel rare after they're gone. This is the illusion of options. When someone believes they have endless choices, they start treating connections as disposable, replaceable, upgradable. But what they don't realize is that most options offer surface level excitement, not emotional depth. So she moves from person to person, conversation to conversation, thinking she's exploring. But emotionally, she's searching for the feeling you gave her, even if she doesn't want to admit it. And this is where regret starts to form its real shape, not as sadness, not as guilt, but as comparison. She doesn't just think about you, she measures everyone else against you. And the more she does, the more she realizes how difficult it is to find someone who loves without ego, supports without conditions, stays without pressure, and gives without keeping score. She remembers how safe she felt being herself with you, how she didn't have to perform, how she didn't have to constantly impress, how she could be messy, emotional, confused, and you still stayed grounded. That emotional environment becomes the benchmark. And once a benchmark is set, nothing less feels satisfying. This is why regret doesn't show up immediately. It shows up later quietly in moments of emotional emptiness. When a new connection feels shallow, when conversations feel forced, when attention feels available but not meaningful, when she realizes she traded emotional depth for emotional stimulation. And the most painful part for her is this: she can't go back in time. She can't unsee what she sees now. She can't unknow the difference between someone who cared deeply and people who only care conditionally. And even if she never reaches out, even if she never admits it, the comparison lives inside her, because once someone experiences real emotional connection, every shallow connection after that feels like loss in disguise. And this is where the regret finally becomes heavy, because it's no longer about missing you as a person. It's about realizing what you represented in her life. You weren't just someone who cared, you were emotional security. You were consistency in a world full of uncertainty. You were the one place where she didn't have to guess, chase, or doubt how she stood. And once it's gone, everything feels different. At first, she tells herself she's fine. She distracts herself. She stays busy. She keeps moving, keeps talking, keeps filling her time with noise so she doesn't have to sit with the silence. But silence always wins eventually, because silence forces honesty. And in that honesty, she realizes she didn't just lose a relationship, she lost emotional safety. This is the kind of loss that doesn't scream, it whispers. It shows up late at night when no one's around. It shows up when something good happens and there's no one to share it with. It shows up when something goes wrong and there's no familiar voice to calm her down. That's when she understands the difference between attention and connection, between being desired and being understood. She might have plenty of people around her, messages, like conversations, compliments, but none of it feels grounding. None of it feels secure. None of it feels like home, because what she lost wasn't just you, it was the emotional environment you created, the feeling of being chosen without conditions, of being supported without pressure, of being accepted without performance. And this is the deepest form of regret. Not romantic regret, not physical regret, not missing your face or your voice. Emotional regret, the realization that someone once made her feel safe in her own emotional world and she didn't protect it, she didn't nurture it, she didn't value it while it was there. Now every connection feels uncertain, every bond feels temporary, every interaction feels like it could disappear at any moment, because she lost the one person who made permanence feel real. And once you experience that level of emotional safety, going back to emotional instability feels exhausting. She might not reach out, she might not apologize, she might not admit any of this out loud, but internally, she knows. She knows what she lost. She knows she traded depth for distraction. She knows she walked away from something that wasn't replaceable. And the hardest part is this: she didn't lose you because you failed her. She lost you because she failed to see what she had. And emotional security is one of the rarest things in human relationships. Once it's gone, it's almost impossible to find again in the same form. And this is where the story truly closes, not with a regret, but with your transformation. Because while she is looking backward, replaying memories, comparing connections, and feeling the emotional absence, you are moving forward quietly, subtly, powerfully. You are no longer standing in the same emotional place where she left you, and that shift changes everything. At first, your growth isn't loud, it doesn't announce itself, it happens in silence, in the way you stop waiting for messages, in the way you stop checking your phone, in the way your focus shifts back to your own life, your goals, your purpose, your identity. You start investing energy into yourself instead of pouring it into someone who didn't protect your value. And that's the moment the dynamic fully flips, because now you are no longer emotionally available in the same way, not bitter, not angry, just unavailable. Your attention is no longer easy to access. Your energy is no longer guaranteed. Your presence is no longer something she can casually return to. And that's when a regret becomes real, not emotional, not nostalgic, real. She might see you happier, more confident, more grounded, living a fuller life, not trying to prove anything, not seeking validation, not chasing anything, is what hits the deepest. Not that she lost you, but that you didn't collapse without her. You didn't fall apart. You didn't stay stuck in the past. You evolved. This is the final emotional shift. when she realizes you didn't just leave the relationship, you outgrew it. And outgrowing someone is far more painful than losing them because loss suggests something temporary. Growth suggests permanence. It means the version of you she once had access to no longer exists. And here's the real power: you didn't grow to make her regret. You grew because you chose yourself. You stopped negotiating your worth. You stopped overgiving. You stopped staying where you weren't being valued. And that self respect wrote your identity. You're no longer the person who waits, you're the person who chooses. So even if she reaches out, even if she wonders, even if she regrets, the emotional door is no longer in the same place. Not because you're closed, but because you've moved. Your life is bigger now. Your standards are higher. Your energy is aligned with growth, not attachment. And that's the final truth. The love she took for granted didn't just become the love she regretted, it became the love that taught you who you really are.